Some RPGs take 30 hours, some take 200, but at what point does length stop being fun and start being a chore? This can be good or bad depending on your personal preference, but one thing we all have is backlog guilt. We have to spend our time wisely, and maybe, for some people, going into a 100-hour game isn't the smartest choice. Instead, they would much rather prefer to play smaller 15 to 20-hour games. There's also the issue of time commitment. If you go into a game that's going to be 100 hours long, you might want to stick with it until the end so you don't forget the mechanics or the story. And then there are modern lifestyles. You have to do stuff in your day-to-day that maybe won't even allow you to play a 100-hour game because you want to manage your time between real life and gaming instead of having those long drawn-out sections. Welcome to RPG Talks. This is your one-stop shop for RPGs, and today we're talking about RPG length. Well, in my own experience, I enjoy very much both lengths of RPGs, either really small or really long. Because even when you're talking about really small RPGs, they aren't really small, so a small RPG would be something that is between the 20 to 40 hour range, and the longer RPG is anything that would go from 70 to 80 hours up to even 200 or the hundreds of hours, things like your The Witcher or your Baldur's Gate 3. So what is the problem with long RPGs? Now, there are your most familiar ones, such as padding and filler. A lot of RPGs tend to draw out their playtime with things like padding and filler in the form of fetch quests and grinding for XP to tackle that new boss. And this can be either good or bad for some people. For people like me who come from an MMORPG background, we don't really mind the grind even if it is on single-player games such as Final Fantasy VII or Skyrim. But it gets to a point where there are these kinds of radiant quests that are similar to the ones that we have in Skyrim, where you are just doing random miscellaneous objectives that don't really add anything to the game and are just AI generated quests for the player to have something to do if they want to keep playing and playing the game and progressing their character. And I think those should be cut on and the game should be more properly balanced so the grind doesn't feel forced to draw out playtime from the player. It also happens that when games are too long, your backlog pile grows, because we all know that the Steam sales and every sale that we shop in, just from Humble, PlayStation, whatever platform you are in, people buy games. And if you are stuck on a 100-hour game, that backlog pile keeps growing, and you might feel guilty and even drop those games that are 100 or over 100 hours long to go and play the other games you are buying. And that leads into a cycle in which maybe sometimes you don't even beat anything because you are always switching from a large game to a larger game to a larger game. Something that wouldn't happen if you would play, let's say, a smaller game that was 50 hours or less. And I know 50 hours is still pushing it. I'm personally right now I'm playing Silksong and I've invested over 50 hours in that game. But 50 hours might be too much for someone, so they might just go and play something that's 20, 30 hours. And then there's the general accessibility issue. Some people can't sink 100 hours plus into a game. They have families that they need to take care of, they have jobs they need to go to, and they just don't want to get home and play the same thing for 3 months in a row, because if you only have like 2 to 3 hours or even less to play in a day, you're going to spend a lot of months in a 100-hour plus game. But there is a case to be made for why long RPGs should really exist. Ever since their immersion in the Western world and the Eastern world, RPGs have been long games. It's only more recently that people have started making RPGs that are shorter, on the shorter side, and those mostly come from the indie side of the industry. But a long RPG allows you for deep immersion in the world and the characters. Having a game that's 100 hours of actual content and not just filler allows for characters to build up good emotions and good backstories to the point where at the end of the game you really feel like that character is someone and that you invested time into knowing it, and you have come out with this kind of sweet spot where you know a lot about the character and feel rewarded for playing and investing so much in one game. And if the world is actually properly built, something like The Witcher or Skyrim, you will enjoy the world the more you explore it, because you will know different corners of the world and you will explore different points that maybe without investing the proper time you wouldn't even know that they were there. And then there's the obvious part, which is value for your money. Having one game that can last you months for some people isn't a given. We talk a lot about the backlog and how we want to play the most games possible from our library, but some people really just want to get the most out of their money because games nowadays are expensive. And a lot of people don't really browse the sales or don't have time to think about what they are going to play, and they really want to get home and have that game that they are going to play like hours and hours on end, which was the case for many people with things like Elden Ring. When Elden Ring was popular, people were just going around and picking the game up every day and playing it and exploring and killing whatever showed up on their screen. And of course, we have that one thing that every RPG player likes, which is RPGs thriving on epic journeys. An RPG is that game in which you want to start at the village killing the little slimes and you want to end up killing God at the end of the game. And that's something that every RPG player knows and feels like doing once they go into an RPG. And it really doesn't feel good when all of that happens in a matter of 20 to 30 hours. And that's not to say that it isn't possible, and games like Expedition 33 most recently have proven that it is possible, but it takes really good setup and writing done in the proper way for it to work. Now, for me, I do not have a sweet spot or an ideal length for an RPG. I like both the smaller ones and the bigger ones, but what I really like are games that you can go through the main story in, let's say, 30 to 40 hours, but then there is good enough content for you to play 100 hours of it. Things like Skyrim, things like Chained Echoes, or even Persona 3 Reload, which is more on the 60-hour side, but you can breeze through the main story and just don't do side stuff, but the side stuff in that game is like the main appeal. And there's a huge difference between long but meaningful and long but padded. Even though, as an MMORPG player myself, sometimes I like padded, because sometimes I like to come home, turn my brain off and play something that I know is an RPG, so I will have fun, but I don't need to pay much attention to and can just relax after a long day. And something like that would be coming home and doing some random Skyrim caves to progress my character without having to think too much about going in and killing all those draugrs. RPG length isn't one size fits all. There really is space for smaller RPGs to be as good as longer RPGs. And them being longer is just a cultural thing that has been dragging on ever since the NES era, even though, as people like to think, older RPGs are way longer, that really didn't start being the case until the PS2 era of things, where RPGs could really draw out, because something like the original Final Fantasy really wasn't that long if you knew what you were doing. But in essence, companies like Sandfall Interactive have proven that more recently smaller RPGs can really have as impactful and meaningful stories as longer RPGs such as Baldur's Gate 3, which won Game of the Year, and that's something that will evolve as the years go by, and we will see how new RPGs will come along and try to be smaller for people's attention span. And that is also a big topic that I don't want to dive too deep into today, but the fact that RPGs are smaller is also a reflection of the people. People have smaller attention spans, and no matter all those topics and reasons I gave you at the beginning of the video, some people just cannot pay attention to a 40 to 50 hour game, and some developers really want to show their message, so they opt to make smaller games so more people can play them with a goldfish attention span. But now, I would like to pose a question to all of you. What is your ideal RPG length? 30, 60, 100, or even more than that? And comment down below what you think about this topic. I think it's a very interesting one because a lot of people debate on it, but I would really like to hear what you think about it. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episode of RPG Talks, and I'll see you in the next one. This has been the Retro Den, and I'm out.